Good morning, everyone, and welcome to join our last series of Transforming Communities webinar series. I hope you have found our new time and new link. Welcome to join. Today we have a bit of a special occasion because we have also a live audience. I'm afraid you can't see them, but they are there, and we are also going to most likely give an opportunity for the audience to ask questions here on the spot, but also in the chat. So feel free to use the chat during the webinar as well. We have the first guest of today, Joni Virkkunen, here with me. You are the research manager in the Karelia Institute, and you have arrived from Joensuu.
Yes.
Later we will have also Iro Särkkä. I will present her a bit better later, but we start the discussion with Joni.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here today. We will talk a bit more about the cross-border cooperation and also about weaponization of migration and the EU-Russian, Finnish-Russian relations. And you have been researching of all of these.
Yes.
Thinking of the border between Finland and Russia that has been now in an international spotlight, I guess, because of the NATO discussion, the war of Ukraine, and the attention has been like quite solid on these questions. The border is about 1,340 kilometers long. You have been focusing on the controlling the border and the cross-border cooperation, so maybe we start first to ask that what does this border mean for the local communities and the identities that live on both sides of this border?
Yes, so I'm coming from a city called Joensuu, which is very close to the border. It actually has the border, small border with the Russian Federation. And during the Soviet Union, the border was closed. And the meaning of the border has changed during these 30 years remarkably. First, it created a new opportunity for the region to look also to the east. So also St. Petersburg is not very far, about same distance than to Helsinki, approximately. And of course, the Republic of Karelia, which is just across the border. Then we could see all kinds of business back and forth, very kind of free people going back and forth to do business, unorganized. But at the same time, Russia was still very unstable, lots of social problems, and there was this kind of humanitarian type of cooperation to Russia. But the problem was that at the time it was quite one-sided. So it was kind of people helping Russian social NGOs and communities to survive with health issues, social issues. But that was also the starting for more organized cross-border cooperation, how to do things better. And a number of Finnish NGOs applied the funding of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, lähialueen rahoitus, so this kind of nearby area funding.
It was kind of a development cooperation
funding. But then when Finland joined the European Union, then that opened again new perspectives for funding and cooperation in terms of how things could be organized. And year 2000, the Regional Council of North Karelia, Kainuu and Northern Ostrobothnia, and the Foreign Ministry of the Republic of Karelia made joint so-called Eureka Karelia, which means that for the first time the structures and decision-making of cross-border cooperation was joint. So everything was decided together with these three parties, and on very local and regional levels. Now, so this we can talk about institutionalization of cooperation, and then during the last years, the cooperation is very huge. People and people cooperation, basically people going back and forth shopping. We have lots of Russian immigrants from Republic of Karelia, from St. Petersburg, Moscow. And that's why it has become part of our everyday life until 24th of February. And until COVID, actually. So the COVID was the first, basically closing the border for a very long time. And again, but still, cooperation continued online. But then the war changed everything.
Okay, and I guess we can also move on to discuss what happened then. But if you want, before going to the war, do you want to quickly say that how was the COVID period like if the border was already closed? Do you see that it kind of changed things already?
Oh yes, it did. The projects, of course, had to think what to do. They were not able to cross the border physically, so doing any research together, any events together, like physically, like in this room at the moment, was basically impossible. But then, like in other spheres of life, they invented Zoom and Teams and other ways of doing things. But of course, it's not the same.
Did you see that the mental distance somehow started growing at that time between people?
No, not so much. The mental, it was physical, definitely. So basically, and it was also very painful for people who would not be able to visit their family members and so on for certain periods. But then there were some exceptions, and then now borders still closed for tourists, for example. But people with family members are able to cross. In that sense, that has not changed, but at the same time, it's definitely not the same as it was before. We don't have these Russian cars, the Prisma, for example, and of course it's financial for our region as well.
Yeah, but then came the war, right? And
Yes.
you said that everything changed. So do you want to give concrete examples of what happened? What happened when the war started?
It is extremely interesting. Everything that has been built during these 20, 30 years is now gone, basically. The Eurocchio Karelia, it exists, but only the Finnish parties discuss with each other. So the Russian part is out, at least for the moment. The projects are continuing, which is interesting, but also without the Russian parties. Basically, they can finish the projects in the Finnish side, but of course the meaning of these projects is then gone if they're not able to do things with the Russian parties.
So the institutional cooperation kind of disappeared?
It disappeared. The people-to-people cooperation, of course, the Russian speakers, Russians, they of course continue. But as I told here before, COVID already changed the logics. But then Russian speakers, the Russians, the Crimea divided the Russian-speaking community, and now this war did not. So the Russian speakers are very much in favor of the Ukraine and feeling huge guilt of what their state is doing. And this is very painful to watch in this context where it is quite easy to actually become what Putin wants, Russophobic, because it's not about the people, even though it might be as well, but at the same time, this is just one part of the game.
Yeah, this is actually interesting. We are going to hear a bit more about this because we also spoke with one like young Finnish-Russian lady in Kuopio, and she was like kind of talking about this little bit same stuff, but not so much about the Russophobia. But do you have some examples about that rising in Joensuu region?
No,
okay.
No, and I think as I was saying, the Russian speakers feel shame. They feel ashamed even to speak Russian, but Russian speakers have been part of our everyday environment for so long time that people understand that it's not their fault. Our colleagues are not to be blamed for the war, yeah.
Yeah, and thinking of that, Russians are the second biggest minority group or migration group to Finland. Of course, it doesn't calculate all the people that actually are Finnish citizens, but after Estonians, it's the biggest group of migrants according to statistics. So, it's a significant number of Russian people living in Finland. We now talk about NATO. So this was one implication of the war, that Finland's kind of opinion environment changed really rapidly to favor joining NATO. So do you see how could this potentially change the cross-border movement? Would it, in your opinion?
I don't think NATO is here a fact. It is one, of course, this high politics, but in terms of everyday movement of people, mobility, I don't think that will have an impact. What did, of course, have an impact was the European Union and the Schengen and changing these regulations, but NATO, I don't think is a point here.
Do you see some other possible impact that it could have in the Finnish-Russia, EU-Russia relations?
Oh yes, the Finland's foreign policy to Russia has been very pragmatic, meaning that even after the occupation of Crimea, Finland fully supported the EU's Russia policy and the sanctions and all those, but at the same time wanted to keep the dialogue with Russia going on to a certain level, meaning that with strong lobbying, basically, of the first local actors to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then Ministry of Foreign Affairs being extremely active in the European Union, keeping, for example, this local level cooperation out of sanctions. That was a huge deal for these local communities and cross-border cooperation. And that is, we can actually talk about paradiplomacy and how local actors and local regions cooperate, and they have their own interest despite this high politics of international relations and EU-Russia policy. But again, now we are in the new situation, and it will be interesting to see how this will develop.
Yes, that's why we can only guess at this stage, right, to see where it's going. Moving from NATO to discuss a bit more about in-depth migration. During the webinar series, we have also discussed the 2015-2016 arrival of asylum seekers. In the context of Tornio-Haaparanta, but also people did arrive through the eastern border, right, in the northeast Finland. And you call it an Arctic route, so yes, very much in north,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And later there has been a discussion that actually this was influenced by the Russian government that also kind of uses the asylum seekers as a mean of influence or as a weapon, as you say. And we also discovered that the same thing happened like really recently before the war in the Belarus-Poland border. So maybe we started like, how does this work? What is weaponization of migration?
Weaponization of migration basically means that you states basically use global migration as part of war or conflicts, and it is a political decision to do that. This so-called Arctic migration routes, basically meaning that migrants from different parts of the world first flew to Moscow, and then up to Murmansk in the north, and then first to Norway, to Storskog border crossing point, and then Salla and Raja-Jooseppi in the very, very north of Finland, the two northernmost border crossing points. Then they were led through the border to Finland. Now Finland and the Russian Federation has had, or even Soviet Union had, very strict and quite well applied border agreements of who is being led to the border and through the border. And this means that so the global migratory process in Russia was used, and then the Russian border authorities basically let people to Finland. And how many they were let was just up to them to decide. Basically, it was 10 cars a day, because it is extremely small border crossing point. Both of them are extremely small border crossing points. So the border crossing points wouldn't have bigger capacity, but it was their decision. Also, that was partly not negotiated, but pressured by the Finnish side not to let more. And sometimes they did let more just to make some fuss.
So who were the people who arrived?
This is quite an interesting question, because on one hand, they were Russia was used as a country of transit, Moscow, and then up to Murmansk. But then 1/4 of the migrants, they were immigrants from Russia, basically labor migrants, students, and so on, who decided to join this opportunity to cross the border to Finland and to the European Union. Why? Because of the Russian human rights situation. Basically, very few of them were able to get a legal status in Russia, basically staying in Russia as undocumented migrants. And surprisingly, the second biggest reason was corruption and police. Police, one of the authorities that's supposed to kind of create security, but for migrants, they created insecurity. Basically, illegal arrests, demanding bribes. If you wouldn't have money to bribe them, they would take your cell phone. In some cases, they would even kidnap you to some forest and let you there without anything.
So thinking of the role of the people, so they were also like kind of seen an opportunity to somehow get away from a worse situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's not really a political agenda among the people who arrived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, the third process was the Russian tightening for immigration policy. Basically, not only getting these residence permits or work permits was difficult, but also the number of deportations was increasing. So basically people were afraid that now they are basically being afraid of being catched without documents, but then they would be afraid of being deported back to Afghanistan, for example. The biggest group that came to Finland during 15 and 16 were Afghanis, or different groups of Afghanistan.
Okay. So you have done some follow-up, right? That like what happened to these people? What were the consequences of the events?
We did not follow up.
Okay.
Because our interest was basically Russia, okay. and what this told about Russia as a country of migration.
Okay, so we don't really know where these people ended up in the end.
Yes, no. Yes, no.
Okay. Well, how is the situation now? Am I like totally wrong if I say that the EU actually took an action on this, and the border control is now tougher, that it's harder to actually do this? What is the implication in there? Yeah.
In the Finnish-Russian case, there is no special role of the EU at the moment. Finland is still kind of relying on the Russian cooperation with the Russian FSB and the border guard, but then, of course, how we understand the situation of 2015 and 16 changed with situation in the Polish-Belarusian border, or the Belarusian and Baltic borders, because there it was clearly that it was weaponization. It was people were invited to Belarus, basically using these international agencies and travel agencies and so on to a tourist trip or whatever to Belarus, and then told that now you can go, or we can even bring you to the European Union border. Whereas in none of the stories we read of the Arctic, this did not take place. It was quite free. It was quite interesting. That's at the time migrants had quite a big agency themselves, basically. The role of national media and internet was huge in terms of letting them know that now this route is open and the border is open. And then basically arriving, buying their tickets and coming to Murmansk. And then there would be all kinds of businessmen or activists or helpers to get them to the border. So in that sense, it was not state policy as such, while in the Belarusian case it was very, very different.
So you're also saying that this was like a kind of a showcase that this could be used as also to influence mechanism then later.
Definitely.
Yeah, I remember we had some news that people like arriving by bicycle from Russia to Finland type of stuff, but then there hasn't been much follow-up indeed that what happened like after, so it would be interesting.
Yeah, so the first day, because of this agreement between Finland and the Russian Federation, you're not allowed to cross the border walking, so you have to have some kind of a vehicle. So first they would arrive by bicycles, any type, even small one. But it was winter, minus 20 degrees, very much snow, and it was quite dangerous. One Indian citizen died in a car. But because it was so dangerous, they banned the bicycles, and then people would buy these joint pool cars, also through these mediators, these helpers.
Or the human traffickers.
Or the human traffickers, exactly.
Yeah.
And then they would basically be driven with some helpers to the first border crossing point, and then basically then they would drive further by themselves.
We have some time for the questions from the audience. Is there someone in the room who would like to ask something? Or do we have some people in the chat that would like to ask? Anyone in here? You have a question?
I have a question for the Russian mic. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I'm from Slovak Radio. My name is Sonia Vajsova, and I would like to ask the question about the Russian migrants in Finland. How many of them were here before the start of the war, and how many came here? And as well, the second question, was there some kind of cooperation or agreements about with the working? Like, do you have this kind of migrants, or did you have who traveled between the countries from Russia to Finland to work? Like for example, I'm from Slovakia. A lot of people travel to Austria every day to work. Did it work like this before the war or COVID? Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions. I haven't followed the number, exact number of Russians or Russian migrants in Finland. Also, because a number of Russian immigrants also have Russian citizenship, Finnish citizenship, and this, of course, disappear from the kind of migration statistics. But the number of Russians has increased during the 20-year period, like immensely. Year by year, but this kind of cross-border traffic, daily commuting, we haven't had to an extent. Mainly, only a few cases in Imatra, Svetogorsk, probably it is possible, and also because of the factory in Svetogorsk. But we have, for example, workers from Petrozavodsk coming like on a weekly basis or going home on the weekly basis. That kind of things do exist, and quite a lot, I would think, in these border areas. The border is still a problem in that sense. We've always needed a visa, and you would never know how long it takes, how to cross. And the COVID, to some extent, changed that as well. It became easier when the regulations were easier a little bit. Even with Estonians who tend to come to Finland for commuting. Or on a weekly basis, that was a huge problem. They wouldn't be able to go home for months, meaning that the families were basically in two countries at once.
Yeah, this is also a bit of an experience that I have spoken with, like people that are like kind of living in Finland, but from Russia, that it was already the COVID that made it like hard. So in that sense, like it seems that they don't feel that it gets any harder now, even though there's political changes necessarily. But of course, we don't know yet. But okay, before we move on to the video where you can see Anna to talk, maybe we end by thinking of the governmental relations now. Kind of summarizing that the kind of the local level like implications. You kind of talked about that already, but maybe if you want to summarize like that impact on like really like the people on the local level. How do you see it?
We don't know what will come, and this is the difficult part of it. I'm from a university, from a city where we have lots of Russians, We've had them for a long time. They're our friends. They're like our colleagues. They have their friends across the border. We have our friends and colleagues across the border. Most of our friends are not supporting the regime. Some of course, in Russia, might and will do, and it makes so difficult to estimate the situation. What the impact will actually do, because we do want to continue our friendships, our working together with our colleagues, but at the moment it's not possible. We don't know how this will develop, and also in terms of, it's also a kind of moral issue that we need to support our friends who are against the regime. In many cases, we've heard that basically the war in Ukraine is not one war; it is two wars. It is against the Ukrainian state, but it's at the same time internal war in Russia against the people who are against the regime. And then this is we kind of need to take a stand on, and we need to support, and hopefully we can do that in the future as well.
Thank you so much for the interview. It has been really interesting, and we can maybe continue after the recording. But let's move on to a video. It will start with some perspectives from Finnish youth we met in Leppävirta, which is close to Kuopio, about the war in Ukraine and how it has been portrayed in the media. And then we also met with Anna. Now I have to check Anna's full surname, Rybakova-Kortelainen. So she is from Russia originally, but has family on both sides of the border, and she's currently studying in Kuopio. So we met Anna in Kuopio, and you will see her interview now on the video.
No lähinnä negatiivisia, että onhan se aika ikävä sota. Kärsii niin paljon viattomia ihmisiä, että ei se ole oikein.
Sen pettymystä, että tämä voi vielä tapahtua. Että semmoista raakaa ja vähän niin kuin hyväksymätöntä hyökkäystä sitten tehdään.
Niin kuin surua ja myötätuntoa ukrainalaisia kohtaan, ja sitten just jotkut saattaa melkein kokea vihaa sitten venäläisiä kohtaan.
Putinin sota, että se on yhden miehen sota kokonaan.
Putinin sota, että ei niinkään Venäjä. Että onhan siellä aika paljon protesteja ollut Venäjällä Putinia vastaan.
Esimerkiksi TikTokissa, kun tulee semmoisia videoita, että näkyy just sitä sotaa, että pitäisikö niinku semmoista materiaalia näyttää siellä.
Kyllähän ne antaa aika paljon infoa. Ehkä vähän liikaakin jopa. Niinku säälii tavallaan, kun ne kokee semmoista vääryyttä. Tiedostaa, että on semmoistakin, että porukka niinku kiusaa vaikka venäläistaustaisia. Itse en semmoista harrasta.
Kuvittelevat vähän, että kaikki venäläiset niin kannattaa sitä sotaa. Sitten ne älyä sitä, että ei ne kaikki Putinia kannata esim.
Hi Anna, it's very nice to have you here today in Kuopio.
Hi, I'm happy to be there.
We are going to discuss today a little bit about the position of the Russian-speaking minority in Finland.
Yeah.
And also a little bit about media and social media and the implications of the war in Ukraine and how has it affected the Russian-speaking minority in Finland.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's very nice that you are here to discuss with us about these topics. You have moved to Finland from Russia quite recently, and you're studying in Finland, but you have family in both countries.
Yes, right.
So maybe we start introducing you to the audience. Would you like to a little bit describe your identity? Who are you?
Well, it's a hard question, to be honest, because all my life, while I learned Finnish in school, before school, while I came to my grandpa to Finland, all my life I felt like I didn't deserve to call myself Finnish, because I thought I don't have enough reasons for that. So I wanted to call myself not Finnish, but maybe half Finland, maybe something like that, part of Finnish. But no, I never did that. But my friends always called me like in university or somewhere else. I had so usually nickname like Finnish. So, but I never felt myself Finnish enough, especially when I came to Finland. Because there is everyone Finnish and I don't speak Finnish good enough while I'm into Finnish culture, Finnish literature, everything, because it was in my school, like it was necessary to learn, so necessary to participate in some events, and I was really excited to participate in this event, so I'm really deep into that, but I can't say that I'm like Finnish at all, maybe a little bit now, because I'm part of Russians, and I see that in this Russian group I'm Finnish. So yeah.
Yeah, but that's very well described. That how it is to somehow like kind of be like somehow part of both, but also like that you feel that you have to split into between the cultures.
Yes, it's hard to. For someone maybe it's so easy, but for me it always was a question: can I call myself Finnish? Do I have enough reasons for that, or should I even have these reasons? Why can't I call myself Finnish? Because just part of my family is Finnish. Why it's not enough? So I'm still not sure, but now I'm more brave to say that I'm Finnish. I took my grandfather's surname, so I have a double surname. So, but in Finland I find myself Russian friends mostly. So it was not even hard, while there is much more Finnish people. But I still found someone Russian and I just became friends with them. So, of course, I feel myself as a Russian, but not for 100%. But I can't say that I'm not, while my family, my friends, and my heart is in Russian.
Yeah, but it's actually really in the sense that because you speak both languages right fluently, so you're able to also follow like you're able to follow discussion of both languages and the media, and you can also like relate and understand, I guess, like better, and that's also somehow a great asset that to be able to follow both like kind of ethnic groups or relations among people. If we talk about the war in Ukraine, I think and how it has impacted like the discussion or the relations in Finland, maybe we would like to go a little bit back first.
Yeah.
How is your idea how was it before this war broke out? How were the relations between let's say the majority population and the Russian-speaking minority?
Well, it was nice, because in Finland and in Russia both, it was like no problems. All the time, maybe someone was aggressive, like and always. We have some pretty nationalism dudes who like to say that Finland is only for Finns or Russia is only for Russians. So it always is, but mostly people are so nice, so friendly inside Russian minority and just inside whole Finland. So I had no problems or problems. I never had any problems in Finland while I communicated with Ukrainians or with Russians. So we just lived like we live.
Normal life.
Normal life, yeah. Nothing. So I can say when I started in college there, when I was 16, it was like 5 years ago. So then I lived in the same room with Ukrainian girl. And only once we had discussion about Crimea, she asked, is it Crimea Ukrainian or Russian? And I was just like, I was 16, what can I say? I don't know, I don't care. I just can say that I don't understand why we need that, why Putin do that also. I was just like, I hope that people live their goods, no matter is it Ukrainian or Russian. So only once it was like Ukrainian-Russian relations discussion, but all the time before and after we just lived together, and I've seen no difference between her or my Russian friends. So yeah.
But has this now changed somehow since the war started?
It changed,
Okay.
but mostly in internet, because in just Kuopio or whole Finland, I think it's the same situation everywhere. I met their Ukrainians. I've never met them before in Kuopio, but I met them in there was cultural day in some event. So I came there and there was a lot of Ukrainians. They just came from Mariupol, from Ukraine, and we didn't communicate a lot, but while we spoke, there was no problems in real life. But in internet, and I know that they are friends with our Russians, whom I know. Yeah, but in the internet, it's of course it changed so much.
Can you describe like how? What kind of change have you noticed?
I usually use TikTok. I don't use Facebook or something like that, so I don't know about discussions there. But I know about discussions on the videos in the TikTok. That's also a big blast of discussions. So now I see a lot of videos like I've seen that before, but not that much. Like Russian language is not Slavic because Russians don't understand Ukrainian. What can I say? Why is the argument? Well, mostly when I see videos like that, I'm just so confused because that's not like.
So there's a bit of a new kind of nationalism.
Yeah. I understand why. I understand what provocates Ukrainians to just want to not associate it with Russian, with anything Russian or with Russia at all. They just want to be Ukrainian, and sometimes it's okay, but sometimes the arguments are not into science or are not into just something obvious like Russia and Ukraine are Slavic countries, and does they want or not our culture and everything like dances, music can be similar. So it's okay, and our languages of course. So sometimes I don't understand these arguments like Russian language is not Slavic because Russians don't understand other Slavic languages.
So you mean that like when they are trying to kind of like put like their cultures against one another?
Yeah. So like dances, for example, I've seen that they show Gopak, that's Ukrainian dance, and Kalinka, that's Russian, and they show that these two dances, they are different, but they compare these dances and they say sometimes that Gopak is better, while how they can compare national dances. That's sometimes strange, but of course I understand the reasons, and I'm okay with that. But a lot of people under these videos are not okay. And there is also aggressive discussions about, well, that's so different dances, they're just dances, why compare that? And then someone write that no matter, just Gopak is more free, even like Ukrainian is more free than Russia. You see national dances show our mood. And mostly that's not even discussion, they're just two people speak with wall, both. So, and they don't hear each other.
So I was like a little bit like browsing that what has said about the change of relations, and I found like at least few media articles that have interviewed Teemu Oivo, a researcher from the Helsinki University, and he has followed the discussion among the Russian-speaking people in social media, and evidently noted that the tone of discussion has become more intense in general, so somehow like the discussion is more heated than before. And also he covered that there's like a little bit like signs of increasing suspiciousness between people, like among Russians, like kind of Russian speaking, like kind of also splitting between the kind of different opinions, but also then like other people like kind of being like somehow suspicious against the Russian speaking people. So how do you find this? Do you find the similar tendencies? Is there like thinking that we now discussed about the kind of Ukrainians and Russians having this like kind of debate, but what about among the Russians? Does this war somehow split opinions, if we start from that?
Sometimes I see some aggressive comments in Instagram, well, it's not even, that's not, we can't use it anymore in Russia, like,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
but we use VPN, but of course Russians use it, continue using, but it's, Putin say no to Instagram, but I still see, of course, there's comments, and just people can post something calm, nothing about war, and there will be like it can be public people, some star, celebrity, and Russian celebrity, and there can be comments like, why you don't speak about war, why you don't tell about it, you have a voice, you can't say. And we had, not we, like Russians, and we have like comic star, and he had concerts in USA, and he was asked about war in Ukraine. What do you feel? And he's not Russian. He's from Kazakhstan, but he is popular in Russia mostly. And so he said that, well, I don't speak about it because I'm so scared. I'm afraid about my family and about my kids, about it all. So just let's continue our concert like it was planned. And then people really started to hate him because he doesn't use his voice to share the problems of Ukrainians. And there is a lot of discussion about this situation in Russian-speaking society, because it's like, from one side it's okay, I can understand him. From other side, yeah, why you don't use your voice? Everyone is scared, people die, and you just can't say something. So there is a lot of different opinions, even about just celebrities' views, celebrities' moments, just what they do. They continue do concerts while war. They are not ready to speak about it, and people so angry about that. So I can say that now Russian-speaking internet is gone. I think I can say that there's also war.
Yeah. In the internet.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you're more in the spotlight somehow, being a Russian now? Do people pay attention to it? Do you get like more reaction somehow? Or in general, like people that like are considered being the Russian-speaking minority?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So it's not like that it affects your everyday life, like
Yeah,
outside the internet as such?
Only in internet. In fact, in everyday life, it's like it was. Because, you know, Finnish people are so friendly, so nice, mostly. And when it all started, I got from my classmates from university some messages like, "Are you okay? Nobody bully you. Like, what do you feel about this situation? Maybe you need some help." So no one said that I am just Russian. Go away to Russia. You started a war. No one. And when I meet new people, mostly if they ask something about war, they ask only like, what do you feel? What do you think about it?
But if we think of like then the conventional media, how media reports about the war and the ethnic relations, how do you see that? How has the Finnish media done, or the international media, about reporting?
Well, as for me, Finnish media is so professional. Like they don't say their own feelings through their articles. So maybe that's why Russian minority in Finland is more supportive to Ukrainians than Russians in Russia. Because in Russia, our conventional media is just full of propaganda, and they say that in Ukraine there was nationalists, they killed their own people, and a lot of Russians in Russia, mostly adults, think that we help Ukraine. That Russia helped Ukraine to kill their nationalists, and they are welcome Russian army in Ukraine, while that's, of course, that's disinformation. That's not true, but a lot of people blindly they blindly watch this TV, and they want to believe them, and they believe. While in Finland, that's much more. Your media is more open, and then we can see different like angles to this situation in Ukraine, but Russian media lie in every word. So
yeah, that it has been discussed quite a lot as well, like how the propaganda is pretty heavy, and how it's quite dangerous also to speak
it's very
out.
dangerous, yeah.
But you don't see that this influences the Russians living in Finland. That is, there some people that like to follow the Russian media as well, or it's mainly like more mixed?
Well, mostly Russians who live in Finland doesn't support this position. They mostly they have like, you know, they have this possible to read Finnish news in Russian language, where they see that another point, not like in Russian media, so they are not too much into Russian position. While Russians who live in Russia much support this Putin and his decisions much more, but not young people, mostly not, because they use
also social media more, right?
Yeah, that's because.
So thinking now that we have been now like kind of there has been like a very rapid like change in the foreign policy in Finland as well. Like thinking that now we are in the process of joining NATO, which is like really quite a big change. Thinking of that, of course, it has been a long discussion, but then it was quite a sudden turn to that people actually started supporting joining NATO. So how do you see this? That will this impact like somehow the ethnic relations?
Well, as I feel in normal life, nothing changed. It can be changed only in politics. As for me, maybe Russian can just maybe for Russians it can change for a bit. Like it can be harder to come home and then come to Finland back, but it already was hard through this COVID situation, so maybe it can be just the same.
So the time will show us now that if there will be some changes, how this will
Yeah.
the situation
Yeah.
will develop then. But it's good that at least you seem to have a positive mind that there shouldn't be no fears at least. At the moment.
No fear, because war already happened. I don't think that I can fear more. So yeah.
Okay. So what about in general? That do you see some positive signals that what could maybe change this heated debate? Do you see that now there's like kind of somehow a turning point? At least it was a positive signal to hear that at least on the ground, face to face, people seem to be able to talk and change views. So any positive signals for the future?
Well, I think that Europeans, not only Finnish, but every country, they can discuss about minority problems, Russian-speaking minority problems, because now it's really popular theme in everywhere, because there is a lot of now
awareness about it,
and
attention.
There is attention now, and now Finland see that they have a lot of Russians, and they see that much more than they saw it before. Like it's obvious, but now it's much more obviously. So, and I see pretty much also videos where Finnish parents in videos say that please be nice, be friendly to Russian-speaking children in your school, and say to your children they shouldn't bully them, they should help them. So maybe now it's much more comfortable atmosphere for immigrants from Ukraine and from Russia, from every Russian-speaking country, and just for every immigrants. Now there is a lot of attention in immigrants question, so that's good. That's a really positive change.
But that's an interesting thing that to hear you to say that, like that maybe in the end we somehow break then the old tension between the Finns and the Russians that has been there since the war.
That's I don't think that war is what is was good reason for changes, but war always changes something. So, and it's good that it changed something in positive way.
Okay, but this is an interesting reflection.
Yeah, that is.
But thank you so much for this discussion. It has been a pleasure to chat with you, and
thank you
we
so
will
much.
also continue this discussion there in Helsinki soon. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for invitation.
Yeah. Hi, Iro.
Hi.
Yeah, no worries. Back to the life.
Yeah.
So Iro Särkkä, you're a specialist from the University of Helsinki. Welcome.
Yes, thank
and
you.
you have specializing on NATO.
Yeah, NATO, yeah.
And today we're going to talk about a little bit about the NATO, but also about Finnish national identity and the turn in the public opinion or public imagination about joining NATO. It has been quite rapid. But maybe we go first a little bit like to think how we see ourselves as a nation. Like on the video, Anna was giving quite a positive view that like the relationship between the let's say Russian-speaking minority and Finns is going relatively okay, at least on the ground. And she says that there's much more attention on the issues of what Russian migrants face now. But we can also say that we have a bit of a long roots in the Russophobia in Finland, that it has been a question that the relationship hasn't been fully without complications, even though also Joni before said that the kind of relations went better during the last 30 years. So you have been researching the sense of safety and the national identity and foreign policy and how they link. So very easy question for you first.
Okay.
How do you see like Finnish national sense of self in the public imagination? What it consists of?
Well, I think identity is always determined in relation to other. So if we think of the significant other in terms of Finnish foreign policy, I think it's Russia. So I think during the post-Cold War period in particular, there's been a very strong sense of distancing Finland from Russia and moving towards the West. And I think it has the historical roots, like you said. I mean, historically speaking, there has been Russophobia in Finland already since the 19th century, even 18th century, I would say, because of the wars and how Finland was taken away from Sweden and made part of Russia in 1809. And if we look at the early 20th century history, the late 19th century history, there was a very intense period of Russification in Finland as well, which meant that the Finnish language and culture was suppressed. So looking back in those days and also the independence in 1917, you can get the understanding that there's been actually a very strong willingness from Finland's part to move towards the West and become independent. But I think currently, and if you look at the present day, I think the Finns have learned to coexist with the Russians. It's been a very peaceful relationship, very pragmatic one as well. It has been built much upon trade relations and economic policy. And we have had lots of immigrants coming as well. I just looked at some statistics this morning. I think in the mid-90s, we had less than 1% of Russian-speaking population in Finland, and now I think it's closer to 5 or even 5.3 or something like that. So the minority has increased, and it's probably one of the biggest minority after the Swedish-speaking minority.
Estonians are the
first.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay.
We actually came. I also checked the statistics, but it is. It's a big minority.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It definitely does. I think it sheds the light on the like kind of the Russophobian history in Finland. But if we think now like the NATO debate, that like it has been also a long debate in Finland, not maybe as like few hundred years, no, but at least like a few tens of years. And during this spring, it has been really a rapid change, because there has been, of course, pro and against discussion before, but now the turn was quite rapid to actually favor joining NATO. So how would you explain why this like kind of public opinion changed so quickly? What's behind it?
Yeah. Well, I think there was a certain historical turn here. And I mean, the Finnish NATO debate's been ongoing for 30 years, from 1992 onwards. And I think it was really the brutal attack on Ukraine that kind of reactivated the collective memory of the Finnish people. And we still have people who lived through the Second World War, the Winter War, and who had to fight against the Russian enemy, the Soviet enemy in those days. And that legacy or historic memory has been passed on from generation to generation. In Finland, we learned that at school as well. So I think the Finnish people got really scared by understanding that those values that are really important for us, democracy, freedom of speech, rule of law, equality, human rights, all that is really core Finnish, what it means to be a Finn, really, that could be taken away from us so quickly, or that could be threatened. And therefore, I think that really scared a lot of the population. Obviously, there are some other reasons in terms of security and defense policy, and decisions cannot be simply taken on the basis of emotions and whether you're scared. So we had this so-called NATO option in the Finnish security policy since the late 90s, which means that if the situation in the security environment would deteriorate tremendously, then we would have to reassess and maybe activate that option. But I think maybe majority of the politicians really never thought that we would have to activate it. In my PhD, which was about the rhetoric of NATO, I actually discovered that this turning point happened already in the early 2000s, that the Finnish MPs, they accepted the so-called NATO option, but only about 10% was actually willing to activate that option before the war in Ukraine, the second war in Ukraine.
How do you see it now? Because it was quite a rapid turn, and you mentioned that like people like somehow there's some level of fear, right?
Yeah.
There's also like kind of an idea that like there's a increasing like threat. Now it seems that the war is going to probably like take much, like it will be a long war, evidently, maybe. Of course, we don't know. But that's how it's estimated, and it seems that it might be quite stagnant, though it may like be somehow like to continue. So how do you see that? Would this change the public opinion again if we kind of like forget a little bit like what is happening in Ukraine?
Well, it's true. Like if you look at the 2014 war in Ukraine or the invasion of Crimea Peninsula, that the Finnish people didn't really get that scared at that point. But this was, I mean, if you look at the events this spring, this was really a full-scale attack on a sovereign country, and coming from all different directions, it was really a brutal act of aggression. And I think it kind of reminded us that actually we should have been awakened already nearly 10 years ago. This has been happening for years, and we kind of just like let it happen. And I think this was just a point at which people just decided that now this is going too far. What we've seen in Ukraine is just so horrible and so unbelievably understandable. You wouldn't even imagine that anything like that could happen in this century anymore, and that made people kind of act. Obviously, I think the Finnish people also are very willing to kind of follow the political leadership. And if our president Niinistö had said already in early March that he supports NATO membership, probably, I mean, even more than half of the population had supported it as well. But I think it's also because of the we had some government policy documents prepared this spring, and in those documents the policy line was updated, and there wasn't really any other options. So all these other options that kind of maybe had some wishful thinking behind them, that EU, for instance, or NORDEFCO, European, the Nordic cooperation, or the bilateral relations could surmount into as strong as NATO, just didn't happen. So.
So you don't think that it's going to change again?
I think there will be. I mean, now we don't know exactly what exact percentage of the population now supports NATO membership. It's more than 3/4. It's around 75, maybe 80%. It probably will come down to 60 or something in years to come. I think it largely depends how NATO will develop as well, and what we gain from the membership. If it seems that Finland is the one that's giving in and not getting anything out of it, then the public opinion might change to become more maybe skeptical towards NATO. Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like a discussion about the EU membership.
Yeah, it could be like that a little bit. But I think for Finland, the national security is so important. And, as a small country, we just can't take that for granted. I think that's what people realized, really, is that, we had this independence, and we just, thought that it's something that is there forever. And okay, nobody's taking the independence away from us, but you never know what could happen, like if we just didn't do anything, and we just like we're blue-eyed and gullible in the sense that we would just let things happen.
And isn't that like really one of the kind of core things in the story of Finland, like that we have this like story of independence, and it seems to be one of the big stories that.
Yeah, and how I've tried to explain it is actually that it's okay. It materializes in the aggression by Russia, that threat, but it could come from somewhere else. So it's not per se Russia that is the threat for Finland, but the fact that a country is trying to take away those values and, our national sovereignty, threaten our national sovereignty, that is the threat. And it materializes in Russia, that's for sure, at the moment.
So thinking of this, that this is not just a Finnish-Russia relations, right? It's also about EU-Russia relations. And so if we try to build a context around this, that this didn't really start just from the war in Ukraine, it has longer roots, right? The kind of finding the balance and the international relations. So how do you see this? Where did the process actually started from, and where are we going?
You mean Finland's NATO membership?
EU-Russia relations, and when they started like somehow getting worse and worse.
Well, I mean, it's... I think the greatest threat for Russia is probably democracy. So, I mean, EU is a democratic political union, and I think it was probably in the early 2000s when not so much of an EU, but maybe Ukraine started to demand for its own right to choose its own path, and NATO started to deepen its partnership with Ukraine, and there was the Ukraine Council even established, and Russia maybe considered that already back then as a threat. It actually did. It has been opposing NATO's enlargement since the 90s already. So I think all those developments, it probably went back to the President Putin's speech in 2007 in the Munich Security Conference, where he kind of expressed that he doesn't like the developments in the Western world, what's happening. And obviously, what does EU have? I think you have to ask that. It's not a military alliance. It doesn't seek to be one. So it has those economic power tools, which it is using at the moment to impose very heavy sanctions on Russia. So I think Russia wasn't very happy, obviously, already with the outcome of the 2004 events. There was very, very heavy sanctions imposed by the European Union already back then, but were they heavy enough? I guess not. Now we see much heavier sanctions. So I think the road has been deviating maybe already since then, to different directions. But it's not really that EU is trying to make Russia to become anything, or NATO. It's more like they don't want, Russia doesn't want the ideals of democracy to spread any closer to them.
Then if we think of the Finnish government's reaction on like kind of a change in relations with Russia, because quite a long time we have had quite a pragmatic approach, right?
Yeah.
When did it do you see that, like, did they see that where Russia is going? Did they foresee that something like this could happen? Like, how is that then, like, kind of context?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, because I just read last night our President Sauli Niinistö's speech about the Helsinki spirit, which he gave actually only in November 2022, so only 4 months before the war in Ukraine started. And I think there was a lot of wishful thinking from the part of Finland's political leadership to think that we somehow had a special relationship with Russia, that we had a deeper understanding than anyone else. And we had all these summits, for instance, 2018, President Putin and President Trump came to Helsinki, and they met, and Finland tried to take this role of a kind of bridge builder or mediator between East and West, quite like during the Cold War years, but already moved further towards the West. So I think that this kind of, it was all based on this idea of trust and dialogue and being able to solve conflict by peaceful means before it actually even starts. I think that failed, really. So I think we just thought that we would be able to somehow manage the situation. And I have to say that President Niinistö wasn't the only one. We had President Macron as well, for instance, from France, who was, flying over to Moscow to make these peace talks with President Putin. And we just didn't see that little by little, Russia is like gaining its own interests and using its forceful means to get there. And then personally, even I didn't think. Somebody asked me in February, what do you think, there's going to be a war in Ukraine? And I said, well, I think it's just rhetoric. I just couldn't believe that anything like that could happen, Yeah,
but that's very interesting. And actually, we have had a lot of news about President Niinistö calling Putin and so it reminds a little bit from the Kekkonen era, isn't it?
It's kind of it is kind of a flashback to that era, and I also thought that isn't that kind of going back in time, like trying to find a way to mediate. But then I think it was it's just the political leadership in different countries thought that by negotiation we could find a way, a solution, and then that just didn't happen. So yeah.
So how now, if we're going to join NATO, as we most likely will, if we accept it?
Yes.
There's own political dialogue around that, but it most likely will be the case that Finland becomes a member. Would this somehow change or this whole kind of war and the situation, would it change it somehow how Finland sees itself as a nation in the future?
Yeah, I think we would certainly leave the era of Finlandization or post-Finlandization, you could say, behind. That would be the end of it, and it's already come to an end. So now we are actually taking the final step to move towards to the group of Western nations by joining the alliance, and that is, in terms of Finland's identity, a huge step. We abandoned our neutrality already in 1995 by joining EU, so we became politically member of the European Union, but we stayed behind the military alliance, and that had actually quite a big meaning in terms of Finland's identity as a foreign policy actor. And now we are going to that core group. So I think Finland has to kind of redefine what it wants to be as a foreign policy actor. It doesn't mean that it will leave all those fundamental values behind that it had, but and also it can maybe reinforce in cooperation within those like-minded nations or very close neighbors that we have, the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries, for instance, in the region. So it also gives new opportunities and venues for cooperation, but that's going to happen within NATO and not EU.
Okay, so that's your conclusion.
That's my conclusion. Yeah, it's going to be more NATO. Yeah.
Okay, so what
if Finland gets to join, that's one thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to justify that a little bit? That why? And
well,
how?
Well, I think EU is also a very large group of nations, and I think it's kind of like NATO actually. It has different directions, and I think if we think of EU, for instance, as a foreign policy player, I think France, for instance, who's the kind of leader of EU's foreign and security policy, has different security interests than the Nordic countries or the Baltic countries or Poland, for instance, or the Nordic countries. So we kind of first of all operate in a different region. In the kind of northern flank, and whereas France looks more towards North Africa and Middle East and those areas. So I think what we'll see is that there will be different types of kind of forms of structured cooperation that will reinforce in years to come. Some of them will happen within EU, some of them will happen within NATO. I think Finland will reinforce her relationship with UK as well as part of the JEF cooperation initiative. So I think we will see kind of restructure, like geographical restructuring of different security formats within these institutions.
Okay, well that's a very interesting point, I must say. But thinking of the cross-border cooperation then and movement of people, migration. How do you see it? Because now, of course, Finland has come. Of course, we've always been close to Sweden, but now somehow this joint, kind of NATO process has also again somehow brought it up. So, What will happen? What is your perspective? What will happen? Will we kind of leave the Russia behind somehow fully? Or?
Well, I don't think Finland can ever leave Russia fully behind because, Russia is our next door neighbor, no matter what, and we still, no matter what, have to cope with Russia and try to find peaceful ways to cope together. And I think there will be also, obviously now all the ties are, cut and pretty much, but in years to come, I think there will be pragmatic ways to cooperate, and there's still, for instance, if you look at security at the sea, for instance, in the Baltic Sea area, there are lots of pragmatic issues, or border security, that there is room for cooperation. But I think building that trust again, that was part of Helsinki Spirit idea as well. It will take generations to rebuild, and that's a long time.
We have some time for questions from audience. Do you have questions?
I have one question about maybe some alternative reality or predictions. What do you think? How much time, how long would it have taken for Finland to join NATO if war hadn't been started?
Okay.
Maybe we repeat the question that,
yes.
that the audience can hear as well. So how long would it have taken Finland to join NATO without the war in Ukraine?
Yeah. Well, I thought this is a good question because I thought it was kind of a vicious circle that we were just running around. It didn't have a beginning or an end. We kept going around in a wheel. So in terms of our domestic debate, I think we would be still debating. So this is one thing, because we had so many elections, and I always thought that it's going to be electoral theme. It's going to be presidential elections. It's going to be general elections, but it was also kind of very difficult theme to debate for the Finns as well, and for the politicians. It's very politicized theme in Finland as well, meaning that the politicians actually tried to, some of them even suppress that topic under the surface because they were afraid they would have to say aloud what they thought about NATO membership. And they were just saying, well, we keep this option. And the NATO option was a very formidable way of, kind of not telling directly what you think about NATO, because it was acceptable, but you didn't say directly that, I'm for the membership. So then you would say, I identified this group of skeptics, for instance, who thought that this was actually decrease security in the region if Finland would join NATO, and some were openly against joining the alliance. So I think we'll be still debating. So it could have come up in the next general elections next spring, or in the next presidential elections in years to come. But it could have just gone on forever. And I thought that it was going to go on forever. It's kind of this permanent theme or topic that just comes up and never fades away completely, but we will never find a real solution for it. But I think this war in Ukraine, really, it really surprised me. I didn't expect this to happen. Yeah.
So how about the Russian government? Did Putin think that this will trigger this whole NATO membership process?
I think he didn't think of that because, and it happened so quickly that there's nothing to be done anymore. It's like there was I think there was a lot of discussion about hybrid influencing, for instance, that whether, Russian authorities could try to influence the public opinion in Finland and scare people if we join NATO. And then, that if we, for instance, would have a referendum, that it would really not be an open referendum, but it would be influenced so, strongly by the Russian authorities that the outcome just wouldn't matter. So I think he never really thought that far. I think he was so focused on Ukraine and, achieving his objective there that he didn't think of the side effects of Finland and Sweden, and I think Sweden is the real surprise. Finland I can still justify, but Sweden, in the 2 months,
Sweden.
The non-allied neutral Sweden in 2 months, from no, we are not going to apply for NATO membership. Yes, we will apply, and we have applied. So that is a big change, because in Sweden this like ideological background for neutrality is much stronger than in Finland.
Go ahead,
I
Sonia.
have a question which is connected to Sweden.
Okay.
Sweden has its neutrality roots are 200 years ago, for example. Austria is as well neutral after the Second World War. They have it somehow as well as a part of their society. And here in Finland, why the Finland never joined the NATO? Because as you said as well, that there is the fear of the people, which is still there. They remember the Second World War, other wars, but and now it's reactivated, but they have it. So why you never joined Finland?
I'm going to repeat the question that the webinar audience can hear as well. So the question in short is that why did Finland didn't join NATO before?
Okay, this is very good. I actually prepared for this question for another talk, so I can answer it because I've been thinking about it. Well, first of all, I think it was too big of a step for Finland to take immediately after the end of Cold War. I mean, from a neutral country joining a military alliance, would have been just too much of a big step. We were not ready for that, so we kind of nudged our way through. Or towards the West by first joining EU and then thinking about it. But that still doesn't explain why we didn't join early 2000s when the Baltic countries joined, for instance, or Poland joined in 1999. So my second explanation for that is identity related, because I'm a constructivist. I tend to say that also in terms of school of thought. So it was because we didn't want to profile ourselves as a security seeker, but as a security provider. And if we had joined with the Baltic countries and with Poland and the other Eastern European countries, we would have identified ourselves with the ex-Soviet bloc who seek for security rather than provide it. And this was a wrong reference group. So it was kind of this ideological reason as well. But now this, this war in Ukraine, why do we do it now? It's also identity related, because it's not, yes, like I said, it's an instrumental threat from Russia that we have to face, but we had to face already in years to come, years behind. But also it's for the fact that we feel that our national sovereignty and those ideals that we have, those values that we have, are threatened. So we want to maximize our security. I know that comes from the rationalist school, maximizing security, but I agree with that we want to maximize our security because our, norms and values are threatened.
Thank you. I think those were the final words of the interview, because we are slowly running out of time. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure discussion continues still. This wasn't probably the last occasion to talk about this, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the questions. Lovely.
Yes. Feel free to give the applause. It's good. So thank you everyone who have been following us online. This was the last episode of our webinar series, and it has been a pleasure to have you there. And we will also publish the recording most likely next week. So if you want to check something, this will be on live in Vike's website. Thank you so much. Bye.